Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. The biggest question facing the US economy is when skyrocketing consumer prices are going to come back down to earth. Over the last number of months, prices for just about everything have gotten more expensive. Whether you're looking to buy a used car, whether you're going to the grocery store, or looking to get a new phone, everything across the board is more expensive right now. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail what is causing inflation in our economy, the likelihood that prices are going to eventually come down, and how you can be positioning yourself effectively to be able to come out of the other side ahead. So let's take our time, dive into the details, jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, prices for just about everything have gotten more expensive in the US economy. Whether you're going to a store and purchasing groceries, whether you're looking to make a larger transaction like buying a used car, or if you're just getting new clothes, every single sector is up right now. And this is caused in large part due to the pandemic. When the pandemic struck back in March of 2020, what happened was a self-inflicted recession. We had to close the economy down in order to protect people's health, but as a result of that, it limited people's ability to actually stimulate the economy and do things like they normally would. So as a result, the federal government stepped in with large stimulus packages and spent a bunch of money and pumped a bunch of capital into the economy to basically keep things afloat so that way we could actually get through this. The first action that they took was through the CARES Act, which was $2.1 trillion. This sent direct payments to individuals, it stimulated the stock market by purchasing bonds, and it did all sorts of other things to basically stem the tide and hopefully allow people to get through the situation. But as a result of this, when the government decided to spend this much money, what they're in essence doing is devaluing the US currency by printing more money that isn't necessarily paid for. So that was kind of step number one towards where we're seeing right now. Now, when you think about what happened during the overall pandemic as a whole, supply chains were thrown off because people were not being able to go and actually work. They were either having to work remotely or not work at all. So therefore, then a backlog occurred, and then we saw prices start to increase because the supply was low but demand was high. This is specifically noted when you look at the lumber sector, and this is tied into housing prices, where lumber skyrocketed significantly, not only because they had limited supply, but then when you factor in the inflation, then everything kind of doubled down and we saw those prices increase. Now we're seeing this trickle effect down into your normal day-to-day purchases. Whether you're buying toothpaste, whether you're buying clothes, whether you're buying food, you're seeing everything is more expensive right now, and that is thanks in large part to what happened with the pandemic and some of the emergency measures that were put into place by the federal government. One of the most effective ways that you can navigate this situation is if you inflate the like button for the YouTube algorithm. I'm just kidding, but if you wouldn't mind tapping that like button, it would actually help the channel out a lot and help push this video to other people who might want to hear it. So please do that if you wouldn't mind. Now, it wasn't just the CARES Act that was enacted. We had additional stimulus measures that took place throughout the pandemic and now into the new year, where we actually have a new president who also initiated a new action. And one of the most significant pieces of legislation that was passed was the American Rescue Plan, which was a $1.9 trillion piece of legislation, once again sending direct payments to individuals, helping to buy bonds in the stock market, and then providing businesses relief as well. So all of that money, once again, is just put on the balance sheet for the United States government, further devaluing the currency and then overall causing things to get more expensive because more people have more money. So when we have this happening throughout the economy on a grand macro scale, you can understand why prices start to increase because more people have more money, we have a limited supply of goods because of supply chain issues, and then it just starts pumping the price up. This also explains a bit of why you might have seen people diversifying into more cryptocurrency investments and why you saw housing prices increase and why everything has been a little bit rocky over the last year because of this level of uncertainty. Now, I'm not here to say that the federal government is not allowed to or shouldn't spend this kind of money because obviously those emergency relief measures have hopefully helped a lot of people, but it's something for us to be aware of as to what the cause is behind this. Now, if you take a step back and think through the various different cycles where we've had substantial inflation before, this is a bit different than what we've seen previously. Back in the 1960s, inflation really started to creep up and got into double-digit territory in the 1970s. That's where we had gas lines and everything was more expensive significantly, and people actually saw the stock market go down as well at the same time. So one of the biggest distinctions between what happened back then to what happened now is out of that time, we actually had just come out of the Vietnam War, and because of that, the president at the time actually spent a ton of money in the US economy, basically inflating the currency and causing the overall price for everything to come along with it. Now, we're having this temporary issue with a pandemic, so it's a slightly different scenario, and that is where we're going to see some of the similarities right now at the early stages, but Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and others have indicated they believe this is a transitory period of inflation where it's not going to last a long period of time, because just like the recession was self-inflicted, this inflation is self-inflicted. It's not because of the fundamentals of the economy. So that's just something for us to have a little bit of peace of mind moving forward as well. Now you might be asking yourself, how should I navigate this situation? Well, there are a few things that you can take into consideration. Obviously, you need to make sure that your basics are taken care of. You're still going to need a roof over your head and food on your table. So if you take your time to try and make sure that you're getting the best deal possible, utilizing coupons, making sure that you're not spending too much money where it's unnecessary, and maybe holding back on some of those larger purchases right now. Like, don't purchase a used car because their prices are so significant. Maybe avoid some of those larger transactions. Just kind of stick to the basics. So hopefully you can stem the tide and get through that. That is at the first level what you want to do, is to keep your expenses as low as feasible for you. But the next thing you want to take into consideration is make sure that inflation doesn't wear away your currency or any of your savings, because as inflation goes higher, the value of our currency gets lower. So if you were to just hold $1 in your savings account over the course of the year, if inflation is 5%, that dollar is now only going to be worth 95 cents. So if you think about it, every single year that inflation is going, every single dollar you have is worth a little bit less money. So what you want to do is you want to keep pace with inflation, and there are only a few places that you can do that right now. It used to be that you could put your money in a high interest savings account, or you could go and buy bonds from the US government, but those interest rates are historically low right now, usually in the 0.2 to 0.5% range, which is not going to keep anywhere near up with inflation. So really one of the most effective ways that you can actually do so is if you invest your money into the stock market. Now, if you're not currently operating within a 401k or Roth IRA for your own retirement, I'd strongly consider looking into that. But if you just want to get started and make sure your money is somewhat growing and expanding beyond inflation, you want to consider at least diversifying into some form of investments. Now, I'm not telling you that you should go and purchase an individual stock or go and YOLO all of your money into some cryptocurrency or anything to that extent. And once again, I'm just a guy on YouTube. So what I would encourage you to do is, one of the things that I go through is I invest into index funds, which is basically investing into the total stock market as a whole. That way, if the stock market goes up or the stock market goes down, you're able to make sure that your money is continuing to grow over the long term. And that's where you're going to make sure that you beat inflation and make sure that you don't get affected by it in a very negative way. Because if you have long-term aspirations or goals of purchasing a home, being able to advance in your career, start a family, or do other things like that, you need to have a plan in place for your money to help get you to that goal. And if you're able to invest strategically into index funds, that should be one pillar that you utilize to help navigate in that direction. And that is because historically, index funds like the total stock market index return about 7 to 10% on an average basis when you adjust it for inflation and you have your dividends reinvested. So if you're doing that, basically you're making sure that your money is continuing to grow and generally outpacing inflation a little bit, so that way you're never falling behind. And that is something for you to consider. Now, the only way that you have the ability to invest is if you have some form of discretionary income. So you really want to make sure that you have your fundamentals in place first. Make sure you've cut spending where you could, you've saved money in other areas of your life, you're avoiding lifestyle inflation, but really importantly, you want to make sure you don't have any debt, and especially debt that is beyond any percentage over inflation. You really want to tackle that as soon as possible. You could use the debt snowball method from Dave Ramsey. That's one effective tool. And if you have that kind of pillar in place, and then hopefully you've saved enough money on the side to cover your living expenses in case of an emergency through an emergency fund, then you can start investing your money. And that is how you beat inflation, and that positions yourself most effectively. Because what we've seen so far is significant. The prices are hurting a little bit when you're checking out at the register, but if you have a plan in place to navigate through the situation, I am confident you'll come out of the other side ahead, while other people are a little bit further behind. As previously mentioned, it's important for us to have historical context when we're considering inflation. Back in the 1970s, we exceeded double-digit inflation, and that was caused to a variety of factors that I talked about already. But one of the things that was interesting in that time was high unemployment rate generally led to maybe lower levels of inflation. When you think about it, that's because people who are unemployed don't have as much discretionary income to spend in the economy, therefore prices aren't as high because demand is a bit lower. And what we've seen so far is that overall in the economy, what we had when the pandemic began is we saw the unemployment rate skyrocket, and that's why you didn't see really any issues associated with inflation. But then with higher levels of spending from the government, and then simultaneously as the unemployment rate started to depreciate as the economy started to open up, that's why we saw this all coming together. So there's a lot of variables that take into consideration. And there's actually a gentleman by the name of A.W. Phillips who back in the 1950s put together the Phillips curve, which articulates this more effectively than even I could, and it shows how higher levels of unemployment generally lead to lower levels of inflation. So one of the concerns that we are seeing is that overall unemployment rate is starting to steadily decline, and unemployment benefits are going to expire here very soon. And when that does happen, we're going to see more people entering into the job market. You might have seen right now that restaurants and retail and hotel is another place they're having a difficult time hiring people right now because of those unemployment emergency benefits that were put into place. And we might see more people entering into the market. And when that happens, that might cause inflation to uptick a little bit as well. But overall, what we've seen said from the Federal Reserve and from other individuals who are associated with the federal government, they believe it's a transitory process where we're going to see that stabilize a bit and the inflation is going to get back on par where it normally would be, ticking at about 2% a year. So if that is where things are and that's where things are going, it's just important for you to know that if you can take steps right now to make sure you're securing your financial future, that's going to be the best thing that you can do, irrespective of what policies are put into place, what president is in office, what other people are saying on news. You can just make sure that you're taking care of your situation so that no matter what inflation is doing, you're going to be fine. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm, help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. Furthermore, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, do any research on your behalf so you can make well and wise informed decisions moving forward. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create positive content that makes a positive impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful Merry Day. Talk to you next time.